Welcome to another episode of Untold Legends, where I take a deep dive into your favorite fictional stories. Last time on the Metroid story, I detailed a Metroid game with the most mixed reception among the fanbase. Metroid Other M. The last chapter covered Nintendo's attempt to craft Samus into a flawed, relatable character, while uncovering a secret plot to use some of her greatest foes as bioweapons. When Samus responded to an emergency distress signal, she ran into a Federation team led by her old friend and commander, Adam Malkovich. Together, the team explored a secret space station that served as a recreation of planet Zebes, complete with clones of Bezian animals, Ridley and the Space Pirates, and a rogue AI meant to recreate Mother Brain. In the end, the MBAI and the Metroid breeding project were destroyed at a cost. Adam and most of his squad lost their lives, and Samus discovered that dark forces were embedded within the Galactic Federation, working on the same dangerous experiments that made the Space Pirate organization so dangerous. Before we begin Chapter 11, I invite you to check out my Patreon page. If you'd like to support my channel, you can become a GamerThumb TV patron and enjoy its many benefits: early access YouTube videos, behind-the-scenes posts, sneak peeks, and more. Click the link in the description below for the full details. For Samus's next chronological adventure, we go back to the era of the Nintendo GameCube and the Game Boy Advance, an era where the only Metroid games that existed were the original, Metroid 2, and Super Metroid. For years, Nintendo had a drought of Metroid content as they struggled attempting to figure out how to follow up the masterpiece that was Super Metroid, how to reintroduce Samus to the masses in a fresh, new way, yet somehow keep it familiar. Metroid Prime was announced at Space World in the year 2000. And Nintendo was very pleased with the response. Fans were excited about Samus's comeback, and Nintendo realized that they were sitting on a sleeping giant of a series. Metroid was far more popular in the West than it ever was in Japan, and so it was decided that another entry in the Metroid series would launch alongside Metroid Prime as a companion game. After Metroid Prime was announced, development on the companion title began, and although Prime's placement on the timeline wasn't made completely clear at the time, the companion game would push the series into the future. Further than it had ever been, it would take place at the end of all the Metroid stories currently in existence. The Game Boy Color was determined to be too underpowered to properly create the follow-up to Super Metroid, and the Game Boy Advance, which exceeded the specifications of the Super Nintendo, was chosen as the console for Fusion. Nintendo's R&D 1 was chosen to develop the game by the same team that created the Game Boy Advance Wario Land 4. Metroid Fusion would be their first Metroid title, and Nintendo's Yoshio Sakamoto guided them with his ideas. Early on, the possibility of a Super Metroid port was considered, but Sakamoto desired to, in his words, do something really unprecedented. R&D 1's designers had ideas of their own that Sakamoto approved of. They sought to change Samus's designs drastically because it had simply been too long since she'd had a major design change, and Sakamoto encouraged them to find a specific in-game reason as to why her design would change. Another goal of Fusion's development was to keep the exploration aspect of the series while also making it a bit more linear. Instead of a game with minimal story like previous entries, Fusion was designed with animated cutscenes, and much of the story was revealed through text conversations between Samus and other characters for the first time. And instead of exploration with no clear objectives in mind, Fusion offered specific directions with clear mission objectives that served as a guide, although the player could still choose to explore their surroundings. The public got its first look at the game at E3 in 2001, under the title Metroid 4, in a very odd showing where Samus was a large sprite in a dark suit, and the graphics were much more Game Boy Color-like, very primitive. This early build looked nothing like the final product, but players wouldn't have to wait too long to get an updated look. The following year, in 2002, the newly titled Metroid Fusion made another E3 appearance with updated graphics more representative of the finished game. Players were ready to experience two Samus adventures in 1 year, and on November 17, 2002, Metroid Fusion released in North America, the day before Metroid Prime. In Japan, Fusion released a couple months later on February 14, 2003, and Nintendo provided an incentive for owning both titles. If the Game Boy Advance was connected to the GameCube with the Game Boy Advance cable, Samus's Fusion suit could be unlocked, and used within Metroid Prime. Prime was a hit, and Fusion also received overwhelmingly positive reviews from fans and reviewers alike. Some of the positive aspects were comparisons to Super Metroid, with Fusion including its best qualities along with many improvements. Some criticisms focused on the game's length being a bit on the shorter side. Worldwide, Fusion has sold over 1.6 million copies, 100,000 of them just in its first week in North America, resulting in it becoming the third best-selling Game Boy Advance game that month. Together, the combo of Metroid Prime and Metroid Fusion re-established Samus as a powerhouse in Nintendo's catalog of characters. And to this day, both games are seen as some of the best games in the series' history. But what circumstances caused Samus to go through such a design change? And what new threat will force Samus to push herself to her limits? As a reminder, this is not a walkthrough. Some gameplay elements may be moved around in order to tell a coherent story. And with that, I'd like to welcome you to the Metroid Story, Chapter 11, Apex Predator. The Metroid breeding and space pirate cloning project was vanquished, and the bottle ship where they took place was destroyed. Thanks to the efforts of Samus and Adam's sacrifice, she returned to the headquarters of the Galactic Federation on the planet Dibon with Dr. Madeline Bergman and the only survivor of 7th Platoon, Anthony Higgs. For the first time in a while, Samus felt reinvigorated. She overcame the reminders of her past and a new day was ahead of her. Finally, a moment to rest. But at the same time, she couldn't shake the feeling that there was still unsolved mystery waiting in the shadows. The events of the bottle ship proved that corrupt elements had worked their way into the Galactic Federation with their own horrible ambitions, working to undo all the progress the galaxy had made against the space pirates. But with no clear leads or visible enemy, it was a fight she would need to leave for another day. For now, she took a simple job that took her back to Biologic Space Laboratories, the research station where she dropped off the Zebesian animals after Zebes was destroyed. This mission was a simple escort operation. The station was orbiting SR-388, and the researchers on board were seeking to study the planet below. Since Samus exterminated the Metroids, how did the ecology change? How was nature healing from the once widespread Metroid infestation? Samus accompanied a team of researchers down to the surface, and as expected, no Metroids in sight. However, they came across an unusually aggressive Hornode that instantly attacked them. Samus destroyed it, and something unusual occurred. The Hornode's body disintegrated, and all that remained was a floating organism that Samus had never encountered before. Her scan showed no known information. It appeared gelatinous, and its intelligence level was unclear. Suddenly, it slammed into Samus's suit with incredible speed and vanished. Samus felt fine, and the danger seemed to be gone, leaving the group confused over what just occurred. Perhaps the impact destroyed whatever substance came out of the Hornode. The team finished their survey, and Samus escorted them back to the station. And then, disaster struck. The organism had entered her suit and infested her central nervous system. Samus was overcome with incredible pain and quickly lost control of her body. She collapsed and her gunship veered off course straight into a nearby asteroid field. Luckily, her ship was designed with an automatic eject function in the case she were ever incapacitated. Samus was ejected into the vacuum of space before her ship's total destruction, and she was quickly recovered by a rescue team from the BSL research station. The substance that attached itself to her on SR-388 was all over her now, seeping in and out of her suit. Her vitals were dropping fast, and the station wasn't equipped to handle the challenges that her suit presented when it came to medical care. She was rushed to the Galactic Federation HQ's medical bay, unconscious, and doctors immediately got to work. The situation was grim. What infected her was some sort of parasite. It completely compromised her power suit and was making its way through her entire body. The suit had to be removed. Over time, its biological components became so integrated within her body that it could only be removed by force via surgery. Removing the suit in such a way could kill her, but it was the only chance of saving the hero of the Galactic Federation. The infected pieces of the suit were cut off and sent to the BSL station to be studied, a process that altered Samus's physical appearance drastically. With the suit off, she was placed in an induced coma while a treatment plan could be created. One doctor came up with a solution. The Federation had a sample of the baby Metroid's DNA strictly for medical studies. They already had theorized that Metroid DNA could be used to make various medicines. A vaccine was developed using the baby's DNA, and what they now called X-parasites were attaching themselves to Samus's genetic structures. Once the serum was injected into Samus, it was immediately attracted to the X-parasites and consumed them quickly. The cure was found, but at a price that there was no time to prepare for. The Metroid DNA was also attracted to Samus's genes, and in a fusion process, It became part of her genetic makeup, altering Samus's physiology even further away from being a normal human. Samus recovered and awoke from her near-death experience in a body that she didn't recognize, and Samus Aran was now genetically part human, part Chozo, and part Metroid. The baby Metroid she spared on SR-388 had come to her rescue for the third time. As she recovered, she learned that the Galactic Federation lost all contact with the BSL station, and an explosion was detected coming from somewhere inside. Samus was hired to investigate. Since her gunship was destroyed, and Samus was considered the Federation's most powerful asset, they provided her with a brand new ship on the condition that she follow the orders of the onboard AI that was programmed into it. A digital CO that was in charge of her mission objectives. Following the orders of a Federation computer wasn't something that sat well with Samus, since she knew a nefarious group had infiltrated the organization at some point, but for now she would cooperate. It was clear that the AI was an attempt to manipulate Samus. The AI was designed to behave and think like Adam Malkovich. Its speech patterns and personalities came off just like her old commander. In fact, the Galactic Federation developed technology that copied the minds of their greatest military leaders and digitized them as intelligent AI. But Adam was dead. This AI wouldn't control her actions. Once she arrived on the station, the cold silence was the first thing she noticed. It used to be brimming with science teams walking its hallways, and now, nothing. Samus set out through the empty passageways following a faint life sign that showed up on her scans. It was another Hornode, just like the one she destroyed on the surface of SR-388. Much to Samus's shock, it darted quickly at her and chomped on her arm. She wasn't used to feeling much pain from the heavy protection her old suit offered, and her reaction time had become significantly slower. With a quick thrust from her new arm cannon, she was able to blast the creature away, with a fairly weak blast of energy. Samus knew her recent brush with the X-Parasite left her compromised, but even she didn't realize how far. She was out of breath and her heartbeat was elevated. Her suit scan estimated that she was only at about 10% of her normal strength. This is the weakest Samus had ever been since she was enhanced by the Chozo as a child. It was a realistic possibility that she wouldn't survive this mission if more dangers were on board. Unexpectedly, another X-Parasite came out of the Hornode's remains just like on the planet's surface, and it also flew into Samus. But this time, Samus felt slightly energized. As she explored the station, she failed to find any survivors, instead fighting for her survival against various creatures, all turning into X-Parasites and absorbing into Samus after their destruction. The physiological changes her body went through were deeper than she ever imagined, and she began putting together the mystery behind their origin. The Chozo kept many secrets from her, from everybody. When the Chozo settled on SR-388, they found the X-Parasites, native inhabitants of the planet that evolved below the planet's surface. When they began mining the planet for energy and building their civilization, the X were unintentionally released into the rest of the planet. The Chozo studied what the X were capable of, and they determined them to be an extreme danger to the galaxy. The parasite could quickly infect a living organism, killing it from the inside, while devouring its genetic material into itself. Then an X perfectly mimics the original organism, copying its behaviors, its intelligence, and even retaining its memories. The Chozo maintained the utmost secrecy to keep anyone in the galaxy from coming into contact with X. Instead, they would handle the threat themselves, and in response, they engineered the Metroids to feed off of their energy. Once released in the wild, the Metroids became the native predator of X, and the few remaining X-Parasites went into hiding, until Samus exterminated the Metroids on SR-388. With no natural predators, X-Parasites climbed back to the top of the food chain quickly, and reproduced. They fed on all remaining life on SR-388. All that remained were copies of what once lived. The research party that Samus escorted brought multiple animals on the ship for study. Without their knowledge, all copied X-Parasites. The original organisms were long dead. Every time Samus destroyed a creature, X would reveal itself, and she continued absorbing them. The Metroid DNA in her body essentially made her a natural X-Predator. She could no longer be infected by them, and she could use them as a power source. However, her new suit didn't contain any of the functions that she'd used over the years, even the most basic missiles. Aside from wiping out the X-Parasites, she also had to track down the data rooms in the ship, where the abilities of her old infected suit pieces were recorded. With each reclaimed data pack, Samus would eventually regain her most powerful functions. Aside from the data rooms, copied X's that came into contact with her infected suit pieces also carried her abilities. The first one Samus faced was a copied Arachnus, usually found on SR388. After defeating the Arachnus X, Adam detected several abnormalities in Sector 1 of the space station and determined that the X parasites were invading in large numbers. The station was divided into 6 subsectors, all connected via elevators that Samus had to travel through. She attempted to cut through the Sub-Zero containment area and learned that she not only adopted the Metroid's greatest power, energy absorption, she also inherited their greatest weakness, cold temperatures. Samus was now naturally vulnerable to cold and couldn't move through the environment without special protection. Then Samus took the elevator to Sector 1 before a terrifying new danger could find her. This new threat was the X that infected Samus' suit on SR388. When the infected suit parts were brought onto the station, they merged with the parasite and a new life form was born. A perfect inhuman replica, mimicking Samus in her most powerful state, and armed with everything that her power suit had to offer before she lost it. If Samus ran into this creature unintentionally, she would have no chance of survival. It knew Samus was there, and it was actively hunting her. In order to trap her, it damaged the elevators to the main shaft, and the atmospheric stabilizers in Sector 1 were also damaged. They were meant to create a livable atmosphere on the station while researchers worked, and the X-parasites were attempting to alter them to recreate the atmosphere of their home. Adam and Samus determined that this displayed some level of intelligence from X. They weren't just gelatinous parasites, they were living, thinking creatures. And even complex life forms could be copied, even space pirates from Zebes. The danger that X represented was far greater than any threat the Metroids could have ever posed. If an X were able to get off the ship, it could copy any life form and multiply itself endlessly throughout the entire galaxy. Samus fixed the atmospheric stabilizers and got them all back online, depriving the X of the environment they sought to create. Adam detected the Samus copy, but couldn't identify who or what it was. He determined that the X were receiving help from this mystery saboteur. While Samus was fixing the atmospheric stabilizers, the Samus copy was opening other portions of the station and letting X spread further, infecting and multiplying in large numbers. And Adam commanded Samus to quickly follow the trail and discover the identity of their new enemy. Samus also encountered X-parasites that could combine together and share their genetic memory to create larger life forms, like a copy of a tall gelatinous creature known as a Zazabi. Adam finally identified the person setting up traps and distractions around the research station. He called the Samus copy the SAX and told Samus of its existence. It was responsible for setting off the explosion that was detected. When it first combined into the SAX, it used Samus's power bomb function to destroy the quarantine bay and escape, setting up the outbreak that took over the station. Adam told Samus if she encountered the SAX to run. In her current state, the chance of victory was non-existent, especially since the SAX was equipped with all of Samus's abilities, including her Ice Beam, which Samus was now extremely vulnerable to. Her priority was to regain her suit functions and avoid the SAX at all costs. A chill ran down Samus's spine when she first saw the SAX. It looked exactly like her. It It wasn't the first enemy she encountered that resembled her. She previously battled Dark Samus, but that was a Metroid Phazon hybrid that merely took her form. It wasn't equipped with her abilities. The SAX genetically was indistinguishable from her. She didn't know if the monster had any reasoning or if it was just a mindless husk acting out of pure instinct, but she needed to keep it on the station and destroy it before it could learn the potential that Samus's power suit contained. Samus was also growing more and more suspicious of her Federation handlers that programmed Adam into the ship. Adam was guiding her to data rooms where the Federation knew her abilities were stored, but why weren't they guiding her towards her most powerful weapons? It was almost as if they were attempting to keep her slightly weakened and controllable. And Adam continued to find the SAX fascinating. If these behaviors continued, Samus would need to follow her own path and ensure her own survival. Different areas of the station were taking high amounts of very strategic damage from the SAX's attacks. This displayed a high degree of intelligence from the parasite. It not only mimicked Samus, it was also unlocking her advanced level of intellect as well. It was beginning to think like her. Adam also detected that aside from the damage the SAX caused, another area was suffering from widespread and uncoordinated damage. The Adam AI was concerned that one of the station's most dangerous creatures escaped, a serpent-like animal that was capable of attacking and moving at high speeds, the Ceres. He was positive that the SAX released it, and he sent Samus to find it before it could cause more damage. Samus followed its life signs to the aquatic breeding tanks, but all she found were its remains. The X-parasites had already devoured it, and copied it. From here on, Samus needed to find other security rooms to open hatches. These new areas were filled with violent organisms and hot areas. Yet the Varia function of her suit was still missing, and these new areas were filled with violent organisms and very hot areas that Samus couldn't access, and many of the animals here were from Norfair on Zebes. It reminded her of the pyrosphere on the bottle ship she previously visited, adding even more layers to Samus's suspicions about the Federation leadership and connections to the bottle ship operation. Her super missile data was readied, and it allowed her to defend herself from the BOX security robot on board. Although it was mostly mechanical, it also contained a neural intelligence network inside that had organic components, enough for an X to copy the entire thing. Samus fended off the attack, and the SAX knew her power was increasing. In response, it followed her trail and destroyed all the previous data rooms she used, and began searching for the rest of them. This left no doubt in Adam's mind that the SAX was capable of critical thought and strategic planning. As Samus left to continue finding her abilities, the Adam AI received a secret communication from the Federation forces commanding her, concerned that she may be getting suspicious. Adam assured them that Samus was under control, and they expected him to keep a very watchful eye on her. The mission was now a race against time, and a confrontation with the SAX would be inevitable. But Samus still wasn't powerful enough, still completely vulnerable to extreme temperatures, and still severely underpowered with her offensive capabilities. Adam also informed her that X from the Sub-Zero temperature unit escaped, and he discovered how easily adaptable they were. The Sub-Zero X changed to survive in the cold, and if Samus would attempt to absorb them, they would cause her damage due to her vulnerability. It would be like absorbing cold daggers. He identified the location of her Varia suit data, and she needed to retrieve it before her vulnerabilities were exposed. When she arrived in the Varia suit data room, an X had already beaten her there, It was destroying the computer and absorbing the data. She had to catch it before it got away. And Adam was amazed at the X's ability to process data organically and store it within its cells. A truly remarkable life form. After taking down the Varia suit thief, Samus absorbed the Varia suit data and was one step closer to reclaiming her place as the ultimate hunter. Now she had a chance of surviving an encounter with the SAX, however, still had no hope of damaging its powerful armor. Her new body would reject her old ice beam capability, but Adam devised a solution with their Federation handlers. They sent over data that would apply an ice effect to her existing missiles, creating a less convenient but similar weapon. Meanwhile, the X-Parasites took a desperate measure to deal with Samus, triggering a meltdown in the station's main boiler cooling unit. Samus had 6 minutes to get to the unit and repair it before irreparable damage caused the station's auto-destruct explosives to activate, a measure originally designed to keep the facility out of enemy hands. When she arrived, she found a human scientist destabling the unit, actually an X mimicking a human being. With ease, she destroyed the X. At least now the station was stable, and she bought herself some more time. Now equipped with Varia suit function, Samus could absorb the ice X-Parasites and traverse through the extreme cold and hot temperatures in some of the station's areas. Adam found it perplexing that the X were willing to destroy the ship, very unusual behavior for organisms trying to preserve themselves. He came to the conclusion that the X may have seen Samus as such a large threat to X everywhere that she had to be destroyed at the cost of themselves. Was it possible that X existed outside of SR-388? Surprisingly, the upper deck of the ship suddenly showed signs of life, unaffected by X. Perhaps there were survivors after all. On the way, Samus' suspicions of the Federation were confirmed. This station had ties to the group that Samus called the Ringleaders, the same ones that ran the secret and illegal Metroid projects on the bottle ship. Before the bottle ship exploded, they had removed anything that could expose and implicate them, and before Samus stood the evidence of their actions, the frozen carcass of the Ridley clone that she fought. The Federation kept his body on ice stored in the sub-zero temperature area. Samus had to be more careful when following the commands given to her. She didn't trust her current handlers at all. She followed the life signs to the survivors and found an unexpected yet welcome surprise. The animals she left on the station from Zebes were still alive and quite well, completely uninfected. A bright spot in an otherwise horrible situation. Samus couldn't just leave them caged up and vulnerable to X infection with nowhere to go. She released them and hoped that they would find her ship just like they had on Zebes. With the rescue of the animals, it was confirmed the station had no human survivors. The X as a collective were growing stronger and more intelligent. They used the humans on the ship not only as food, but as a source of knowledge, and the SAX used that knowledge to predict Samus' movements. She was found. Even with all her added abilities, Samus almost perished against the SAX attack, and she wondered if this is how the space pirates felt as she hunted them down. With all their weapons and advancements over the years, not one of them stood a chance against her power, and now she was the prey. The SAX clearly knew about her ice vulnerability. Although her Varia suit protected her, it was the SAX's immediate weapon of choice. It knew everything about her. Adam informed Samus that he had important information and ordered her back to her ship. And as Samus had worried, the Federation's meddling with the Ridley clone's body would come back to haunt her. Samus returned to her ship to communicate with Adam. The main silo of the reactor core was offline, and all elevators were down. She needed to investigate why, and Adam also told her about some strange creatures that boarded her ship. The animals had found it, and were hiding inside safely. Adam locked the ship down to keep them from wandering off and getting into any trouble. To discover the source of the problem, Samus had to cross paths with an X copying the spider-like Yakuza. Yakuza destroyed, she engaged the auxiliary power supplied to the reactor core, but the main silo still wasn't online. This wasn't actually part of the SAX's attack. The vegetation was overgrown and was choking the components of the reactor core. It was the X's fault that the vegetation was growing so rapidly since it copied a large living plant, the Notori. The roots were growing out of control, and the plant was mostly immobile. Samus destroyed it with ease, bringing the reactor core back online. The plant-based X also housed Samus's plasma beam function, one of her most powerful blasts of energy that previously tore Ridley to shreds. Adam expressed surprise that she regained the ability, an action that her Federation handlers didn't authorize yet. Then he sent her to investigate yet another explosion in a different part of the ship. Samus began feeling that the ringleaders were sending her on pointless chases to keep her distracted. They must have been hiding something they didn't want her to find. The damage caused by the explosion was massive, and Samus encountered yet another creature brought on board from the bottle ship, the nightmare gravity system that she'd previously destroyed. Her gravity suit function was restored, and now Samus could move freely through the deep aquatic environments and more. She used her new abilities to access more data rooms and collect her previous weaponry once again without the authorization of the Federation. The previous security robot that escaped was out of control and rampaging in an area near a security hatch that Adam discouraged Samus from accessing. After she destroyed the X copying the machine and unlocking her ultimate wave beam, she discovered what was so important in a restricted lab that was officially off the books. Metroids. And these weren't X-imitating Metroids, these were authentic, grown Metroids in various states of their life cycle. The only version not present in the lab was the adult Omega variety, and a queen. The BSL research station, or at least a portion of it unknown to the scientists on board, was a continuation of the Metroid militarization plan. In a stroke of good fortune, the SAX followed Samus to the secret lab and discovered its natural predators. In a panic, the SAX fired on the tanks and released the Metroids, triggering the 60-second emergency countdown to detachment, in case of an outbreak.
40 seconds to ice.
The SAX was swarmed with Metroids that instantly began feeding on it, and Samus successfully escaped before that portion of the station detached itself and exploded. The SAX and the Metroids were annihilated, another heavy blow to the ringleader's ambitions. This was a strong statement of insubordination from Samus. Adam expressed a grave warning. She was never authorized to enter that area, and she ignored her orders. He claimed the Metroid program was for peaceful purposes only, but Samus knew better. No peaceful application would involve growing and attempting to control full Metroids. He revealed that the SR-388 replica section was designed specifically to grow Metroids, and they were rapidly able to grow them from infancy to adulthood in mere days. The SAX may have been destroyed, but the galaxy was still in incredible danger. Another one was on its way to Samus. Adam discovered that the original SAX had reproduced already, and divided itself into no fewer than 10 SAX on board. If even one escaped the research facility, the galaxy could fall at the mercy of an infinite number of Samus copies. Samus' thoughts pondered on how Adam would have reacted to the situation, and this AI was no comparison. It sounded and thought like Adam, but no shred of compassion or humanity from the man she knew, just a cold, calculating machine following orders. Orders that Adam would have been against. Samus deduced that it was pointless to find and destroy all 10 SAXs. By the time she did, they would have divided even further into more of them. Her only hope was to destroy the entire station with them on board, but first she had to deal with the copied Ridley clone. On the bottle ship, the clone was grown to young adulthood, Ridley in his prime, and Samus was back to her normal battle readiness, and prepared to deal with this pretender. Ridley X was destroyed, and the remains of the original clone's husk was still on board. Once the station was destroyed, it would take the body with it and ensure that Ridley would never be able to return. The Federation ringleaders were growing concerned with Samus's success. They ordered Adam to tell Samus to evacuate. They would handle the rest. Exactly like in the bottle ship, they planned to infiltrate the station and end her mission prematurely so they could retrieve anything of importance. Samus was outraged that they would dare think of such an irresponsible idea. The X had proven themselves to be more dangerous than any threat they'd ever faced, and they wanted Samus to leave them. They didn't want the X parasites destroyed, instead dreaming of how they could be used. The Federation was on their way, and they planned to capture an SA-X alive. Adam also revealed that her most powerful upgrades were ready a while ago, but the Federation held the information back from her to keep her from destroying the SA-X. Samus demanded that Adam open a channel directly to Federation HQ, bypassing the need to speak with her handlers, a request that was denied. Samus had to finish her mission now. If the Federation ship landed on the research station, the X-parasites would overwhelm them and absorb all the knowledge they held. They would effortlessly spread throughout the entire universe armed with the technology of the Federation. The X hunger for form, for knowledge and power, and have no goals besides increasing their numbers as quickly as possible. Samus was determined to activate the station's self-destruct, something her handlers prohibited previously, even if it meant her own destruction. But she was trapped within the confines of its passageways. Adam was ordered to lock the hatches and keep her in one area. Samus begged Adam to do the right thing, and the AI questioned who Adam was. What the Federation didn't expect was that the Adam AI was learning from Samus and her actions. Since it had the mindset of Adam, it was slowly becoming more and more like her old CO. And Samus explained what Adam would have done. He always did what was necessary, even if it meant not following orders. Adam knew that actions had consequences. Some people would live, some would die. But in the name of galactic peace, he was still willing to make the sacrifices, up until the day he sacrificed himself. Adam concluded that Samus destroying the facility, with herself inside, was foolish. She argued with the AI, and he clarified that she was the only hope for the galaxy. Samus was too valuable to let herself be destroyed, just as the original Adam had believed. Instead, Adam suggested a scenario where Samus would survive. He suggested that she change the station's orbit to include SR-388. The high-speed impact of the station on the planet's surface, combined with its size, would ensure a chain reaction that would annihilate both the station and the entire planet. SR-388 was already a lifeless wasteland, only populated by the X-parasites that devoured all life. That would ensure all X's were destroyed and Samus would have time to escape. For the first time, Samus felt like she was talking to the real human Adam again. And the AI closed with the statement, "Any objections, lady?" Adam was successful in overriding the Federation's programming and was now an authentic partner of Samus. The SA-X knew what Samus was likely planning, and finally, she came face to face with one. The battle that would determine who the apex predator truly was, a copy of Samus in her prime, or the newly evolved Samus Aran. In the end, the SA-X couldn't hold its form together and revealed that multiple SA-Xs had remerged into one. Its physical shell of Samus Aran was destroyed, but the parasite escaped. There was no time to chase it. Samus rushed to the bridge and changed the station's orbit to impact SR-388. 3 minutes was all the time Samus had to get on her ship and escape, before she were caught in the explosion, and her final obstacle presented itself. A Metroid had grown to adulthood, the Omega. Samus was damaged and almost out of time. In the end, the balance of predator versus prey helped her survive. The SAX parasite stood against its natural hunter, the Metroid, and allowed Samus to absorb it. She gained all the power of the SAX and combined it with her own thanks to the Metroid DNA within her. But her ship was still too far. If this was her final stand, so be it. She would go down as the warrior the Chozo built. In the final moments of the station, salvation arrived. With Adam's guidance, the animals on board her ship started it manually and were able to navigate it into the docking bay before the entire planet was annihilated.
20 seconds to impact.
Join me next time for the Metroid Story Part 12, The Final Metroid. After the destruction of the BSL research station in SR-388, Samus is lured to the unknown planet of ZDR after viewing a mysterious recording. The X-Parasites may be alive and well. Once she lands, she finds herself at the mercy of an immensely powerful Chozo warrior that decimates her in battle and leaves her fighting for her life against reprogrammed Federation machines and the horrific experiments on the planet. In her final mission, Samus must become more powerful than ever before, pushing herself to her absolute maximum, and come to terms with secrets going all the way back to her very beginnings.